So, without further ado, Ambassador Daalder.
Great. Well, good morning. Let me start off with what I think we're going to be able to do in the next 11 months. At NATO in Brussels, our time frame is determined by the next big event, and the next big event is the summit in Lisbon on the 19th and the 20th of November. If I look from today to that summit and say what would I like the headlines to be at that summit, they would be four things. First, NATO on track to transition in Afghanistan to an Afghan lead. Second, NATO embraces missile defense. NATO embraces the defense of territory against ballistic missiles. Third, NATO adopts new strategic concept to put NATO into the 21st century. And finally, NATO united on approach towards Russia. Those are the four things that we would like to see happen within the next 9 to 10 months. And that means we'll have a lot of work to do. On Afghanistan, the fundamental challenge is to build up the capacity of the Afghan government and people to take care of their own affairs, their own security, their own governance, and their own economic capabilities and development. And the entire strategy that NATO and its ISAF partners, as well as the international community writ large, has embarked upon, will be reaffirmed next week in London, is to hasten the day at which Afghanistan can stand on its own feet to deal with its own issues in its own way, without the direct support of the international community, and particularly without the direct support of military forces. By November, it should be clear that the strategy that we have all agreed upon and the resources that we are bringing to that effort is in fact working. Not that we are done, but that we are moving in the right direction, that we have turned the corner, and that we are slowly but surely putting in place the very capabilities that allows Afghanistan to take care of its own affairs, so that a transition, province by province, can proceed in that country. With regard to missile defense, you may know the United States has proposed a new approach to missile defense that is designed to defend the territory of all NATO allies against ballistic missile threats. To do so sooner than was envisaged under the previous program, because the threat that exists to part of NATO territory is growing more rapidly. But the big difference is we would like this system to be embraced by NATO as part of the fundamental reason why we have an alliance. Today, the threat to NATO territory comes not from armies marching across borders, but from the possibility of ballistic missiles heading to our territories. We need to be able to defend against that, just as we need to be able to defend against the possibility of armies crossing borders, and missile defense offers that possibility. And we look to the alliance to work on embracing this mission, which we all agreed in December was a mission of the alliance, to embrace this mission and to provide the fundamental basis for implementing the capability of defending against ballistic missile attack. Third, NATO has embarked upon a process of writing a new strategic concept, and we would look forward to the heads of state and government in Lisbon agreeing to that new strategic concept. A strategic concept that would lay out the vision of what, clearly state what NATO should be doing in the 21st century. What is the alliance for? What will it do and what won't it do? How will it relate to other institutions and other countries that are not NATO members? In a language that is easily digestible, that is understood, that is brief, direct, concise and coherent. As concise and coherent as the actual treaty upon which this alliance is based. 14 articles, 23 sentences, describes what this NATO alliance is supposed to be about. It ought to be possible to have a strategic concept that takes that treaty and puts it and makes it relevant for the 21st century in a way that is less cumbersome than the 65 paragraphs and 200 and some sentences. That is the current strategic concept, which I dare say few people have ever read, including necessarily at NATO headquarters. So it would be good to have a statement that people would actually be able to refer back to frequently in order to explain not only to ourselves, but much more importantly to the people who make up this alliance, what this alliance is for. And finally, there's the issue of Russia, not unimportantly, where it is clear that we have different views on what is happening in Russia. At the same time, there's also clearly a willingness to have a strategy that everybody within the alliance embraces with respect to Russia. A balance between engagement to seek in order to further cooperation on those issues where Russia and NATO can and do agree, while also engaging to make very clear where we disagree. And we have disagreements with Russia. We ought to be clear what those disagreements are. We ought to use our engagement with Russia as a means to express those disagreements so that we get that out of the way and can focus on the issues where we can and must cooperate. So those are the four challenges and agenda items that we are going to be working on in the United States, that I think we're going to be working on with our 27 NATO allies to push into the end of the year as we get together in Lisbon, so that we have a summit that we can look back to as one that is not just a meeting of heads of state and government, but actually a productive end product of a process to get these policies into place. With that, I'm happy to take your questions.